Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a case that's honestly staggering. It's got everything cutting-edge science, decades of waiting, and a really harsh look at past mistakes.
It really does. We're talking about the 1984 murder of Theresa Fusco, just 16 years old, in Long Island. And it's this double story, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. First, the horrific crime itself, and then, almost unbelievably, 3 innocent men spent nearly 20 years locked up for it.
Until modern DNA cleared them. But the ending, it's almost like something from a movie.
Right. 41 years later, the alleged killer identified how from DNA off a smoothie straw he threw away.
It's just an incredible example of science finally delivering closure after a, frankly, catastrophic failure of the justice system back then.
So that's our plan for you today. We're going to walk through this whole timeline. We'll unpack that original 1980s investigation, what went wrong, the wrongful convictions.
And then we pivot to the really advanced stuff, the forensic genealogy, the techniques used in like 2024, 2025 that finally pointed investigators to the suspect, Richard Bilodeau.
Just looking at the dates tells the story. Theresa disappears November 84.
Then, super quick, by 1985, John Cogut, John Restivo, Dennis Halstead are convicted.
They serve years, some nearly 2 decades, until around 2003 to 2005. That's when DNA testing comes in.
And proves conclusively the semen found on Theresa belonged to someone else entirely, an unknown man.
So they're exonerated, but that DNA profile, it just sits there, cold, for ages.
Right, until about 2023 when things heat up again. Then February 2024, that's the smoothie straw moment.
And finally, October 2025, Richard Bilodeau, now 63, is indicted. 41 years. It's hard to wrap your head around that gap.
It really is. But before we get to the science breakthrough, we absolutely have to understand the weight of that initial failure.
Yeah, let's spend some time there. Segment 1, the weight of history, the wrongful convictions, the failed forensics that really set this case on the wrong path from day one.
Okay, so setting the scene. 1984, Theresa's a junior in high school. November 10th, she finishes her shift at the Hot Skates roller rink in Lynbrook, Long Island.
And just vanishes.
Yeah, vanishes. Weeks go by. Frantic searching, you can imagine.
Then December 5th, the worst possible news.
Her body is found, nude in a wooded area near the rink, hidden under some leaves.
The autopsy confirms it was homicide.
Yes, sexual assault and ligature strangulation. And crucially, the medical examiner recovers evidence seminal fluid from vaginal swabs. That fluid was key.
But the tech back then,
Yeah.
it wasn't what it is now, right?
Not even close. We're talking the era of serology. Think blood typing A, B, O, A, beta. Maybe if the person was a secreter, meaning their blood type antigens show up in other body fluids.
So what does that actually tell investigators? Not much, sounds like.
Well, it could exclude maybe a small fraction of men. If the semen was type A and a suspect was type O, okay, he's out. But it couldn't include someone definitively. Not with any real certainty.
So if they couldn't match the physical evidence reliably, they had to rely on
old-fashioned police work, following leads, witness statements, and unfortunately, as it turned out, confessions that were later heavily disputed.
And that's what led them to Cogut, Restivo, and Halstead. They get convicted pretty fast, 1985, mostly on witness accounts and those confessions you mentioned.
Right, and some physical evidence that also fell apart later. The convictions held up initially, but the foundation was just shaky.
When did it really start to crumble?
Mid-90s, early 2000s. That's when groups like the Innocence Project really started pushing for DNA testing on old cases, using STR analysis, short tandem repeat. That was the gold standard then.
And they tested the 1984 sample.
They did. And the results were unambiguous. The seminal fluid DNA did not match Cogut, Restivo, or Halstead. It belonged to someone else entirely.
Wow, it must have been explosive.
Absolutely. It directly led to their convictions being overturned between 2003 and 2005. These guys served, what, up to 18 years? For a crime biology proved they didn't commit.
Just devastating. But it didn't end with exoneration, did it? There were lawsuits.
Huge civil lawsuits, and that's where the allegations of serious official misconduct came out.
What kind of misconduct are we talking about?
Well, the juries in those civil trials actually found there was evidence of misconduct. Specifically, allegations surfaced that the lead detective, who has since passed away,
Yes.
had allegedly fabricated key evidence. We're talking about hair evidence, which was pretty much the only physical link they claimed. And also that he'd hidden evidence that might have helped the defendants.
Hiding exculpatory evidence, that's a massive violation.
It's fundamental Brady violation, it's called. Prosecutors have to turn over evidence that could suggest innocence. The fact that juries found this happened, it's damning.
And the settlements reflected that severity.
They certainly did. Two of the men were awarded $18 million each for the wrongful imprisonment. That kind of figure tells you just how badly the system failed them.
So let's look at that evidence that put them away. The confessions, for one. John Kogut gave a full confession, right? Written and videotaped.
He did. But his defense leader argued it was completely coerced, the product of extreme duress.
What did they claim happened during the interrogation?
They laid out a pretty grim picture. Held for about 17 hours straight.
17 hours.
Yeah. Allegedly minimal food, no rest, no phone calls. Just isolating him, wearing him down.
And then the polygraph thing.
Right. The defense claimed police flat out lied to him, told him he'd failed a lie detector test.
But he hadn't.
In reality, he'd passed it. It's a known tactic, unfortunately. Tell someone the evidence against them is overwhelming, even if it's not true, to break their will.
That's disturbing. And the courts took this seriously. I know there was an expert on false confessions involved in his retrial.
That was a really big deal at the time. The judge allowed an expert to testify about the psychology of false confessions. The reasoning was important. The judge basically said, look, jurors might think, why would anyone confess if they didn't do it? But they don't necessarily understand the intense psychological pressure the tactics used in interrogation rooms.
So the court acknowledged that Kogut's detailed confession might not be reliable because of how it was obtained.
Exactly. It cast serious doubt on what the original 1985 jury probably saw as slam-dunk evidence.
Okay, so the confessions were suspect. What about the physical evidence? The hairs?
Ah, yes. The 3 hairs. Police claim they found 3 hairs from Theresa Fusco inside John Restivo's van. That was their physical link.
That fell apart, too.
Completely. During Kogut's retrial, the judge made a specific ruling. He said he flat out did not believe those hairs were ever actually in the van.
He didn't believe they were found there, or that they were even hers.
The ruling suggested he doubted the entire story of their recovery from the van. The implication being the chain of custody, or perhaps the discovery itself, was just not credible.
And the defense had a theory about how they got there, involving something called post-mortem root banding. Sounds technical.
It is. It refers to this subtle change, like a dark band, that can appear at the root of a hair if it falls out or is plucked sometime after death.
Okay, so how did the defense want to use that?
Their argument, or what they wanted to argue, was basically these hairs show this banding, which suggests they weren't shed naturally in the van during the crime. Instead, maybe they were taken from Theresa's body after she died.
And planted in the van.
That was the explosive implication they wanted to raise, that the physical evidence wasn't just mishandled, it was potentially manufactured to frame the suspects.
Wow, so they weren't just saying the police missed things, they were suggesting active fabrication.
Precisely. Now, whether postmortem root banding is definitively provable is debated, but strategically, it was powerful. It fed into this narrative of deep-seated misconduct and doubt about all the original evidence.
So by the time the exonerations happened, essentially nothing from the original conviction held up. The confessions were seen as coerced. The hair evidence was dismissed by a judge.
Correct. Every pillar of the 1985 convictions had crumbled, leaving just the victim, the crime, and that unidentified DNA profile.
Which brings us finally to the breakthrough. Segment 2, modern science and the smoothie straw.
Right. So the case goes cold again after the exonerations. That DNA profile exists, but the tech used to clear the men, the STR analysis, wasn't really designed for searching databases to find distant relatives.
It's good for comparing a suspect to the sample, but not for finding an unknown person from the sample.
Exactly. It looks at maybe 13 to 20 specific locations on the DNA. Great for a direct match. Not enough data points for the kind of deep family tree searching needed here.
So what changed? Why did the case suddenly get new life around 2023?
2 things, mainly. The rise of forensic genetic genealogy, FGG, as a viable tool, and the technology to get a much more detailed DNA profile from old degraded samples.
And that's where the private lab Othram comes in?
Yes. The Nassau County Medical Examiner's Office and the FBI decided to throw the latest tech at this decades-old sample. They sent it to Othram.
Why Othram? What do they do differently?
They specialize in getting usable DNA profiles from really challenging evidence, old, tiny amounts, degraded. And crucially, they use a technique often called forensic grade genome sequencing, or FGGS.
Okay, FGGS versus the older STR. What's the difference in practical terms?
Think of it like resolution on a map. STR gives you maybe 20 landmarks. FGGS gives you hundreds of thousands. It's just vastly more data points across the entire genome.
And that extra detail is what you need for genealogy.
Precisely. With that much data, you can find much more distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins, people who share only tiny bits of DNA in genealogical databases. It lets you build out these huge family trees.
So Othram gets this super detailed profile from the 1984 semen sample. Then what?
Then that high-density profile goes to the FBI's specialized forensic genetic genealogy team. They upload it to databases, ones that allow law enforcement use, like GED match or family tree DNA, with user consent, of course.
And they start looking for relatives.
Right, they find matches, maybe distant cousins. Then begins the painstaking work, using public records, birth, marriage, death certificates, census data, obituaries to build family trees backward from those matches, and then forward, trying to identify a common ancestor and then descendants who could potentially be the source of the DNA.
That sounds incredibly complex.
It is, but they also look at geography. Who in that family tree lived near Lynbrook, New York in 1984?
And that process eventually led them to Richard Bilodeau.
Correct. They discovered he was 23 back in '84, living with his grandparents, very close to the Hot Skates roller rink.
Where Theresa worked and was last seen.
Exactly. By 2024, when they zeroed in on him, he was 63, living about 60 miles away in Center Marshes, working nights at a Walmart.
Okay, so they have a strong lead from the genealogy, but that's not enough for an arrest, right? They need his actual DNA to compare directly.
Absolutely. The FGG points them to a suspect, but you need a direct comparison, a sample taken from the suspect now, compared to the crime scene sample from '84. This is called target testing.
And that's where the smoothie straw comes in. How did they get it?
Surveillance. Investigators started watching Bilodeau in early 2024. In February, they observed him at a smoothie place in Suffolk County. He drank his smoothie, threw the cup and straw in a public trash can, and left.
And they just grabbed it out of the trash. Is
Yeah.
that legal?
Generally, yes. It falls under the legal concept of abandoned property. Once you throw something away into a public place, you typically lose your reasonable expectation of privacy in it.
Yeah.
Police don't usually need a warrant to collect trash left out for disposal.
So they retrieve the cup and straw, test the straw for DNA.
And bingo. The lab extracts a high-quality DNA profile from that straw.
And the match.
Prosecutors announced it was a match. A direct, powerful match to the seminal DNA recovered from Theresa Fusco's body 41 years earlier.
Incredible, linking 1984 to 2024 through a discarded straw.
It really bridges that gap. Science catching up, finally.
Which takes us to the arrest and what happens next. Segment 3. The charges and the legal road ahead.
Right, so the indictment comes down in October 2025. Bilodeau is 63 years old.
And the moment they confront him, there was that chilling quote attributed to him.
Yeah, reportedly, when investigators approached him at his Walmart job, after the DNA match was confirmed, he allegedly said something like, "Yeah, people got away with murder back then."
Wow, that sounds almost like boasting, or just fatalism.
It's hard to interpret, but it's incredibly potent for the prosecution. It suggests knowledge, maybe a belief he'd escaped justice because so much time had passed, because policing was different back then.
And the prosecutor used it right back at him in court, didn't he?
He did. Assistant DA Jared Rosenblatt, during the arraignment, looking directly at Bilodeau, is quoted as saying, "Well, Mr. Bilodeau, it's 2025, and your day of reckoning is now."
Talk about courtroom drama. It really highlights the time shift, the technology shift.
Absolutely. Bilodeau pleaded not guilty, of course, and was held without bail. He's facing 2 counts of second-degree murder.
Why 2 counts? Can you break that down?
Sure. In New York, second-degree murder can cover a few scenarios. 1 count is likely straightforward intentional murder. But the sources specifically mention the second count is tied to committing the murder in the course of a rape.
That's felony murder, right?
Exactly. With felony murder, the prosecution doesn't necessarily have to prove he intended to kill her during the strangulation. If they prove he committed the underlying felony of the rape and she died as a result of actions during that felony, that can be enough for a murder conviction. It's often a slightly lower bar to clear than proving specific intent to kill.
And the penalty if convicted.
For second-degree murder in New York, it's typically 25 years to life in prison.
Okay, let's talk about the evidence itself. The DNA match from the straw to the 1984 sample. The prosecutor called it a slam dunk. Is it really that simple?
Well, DNA is incredibly powerful for identification. Assuming the lab work is sound and the chain of custody holds up, it definitively places Bilodeau's biological material on the victim. That's huge.
But it doesn't automatically equal guilt.
Right. DNA tells you who. It doesn't inherently tell you how or why or when within the context of the crime. It doesn't by itself prove the sexual contact was non-consensual or that he was the one who strangled her.
So the prosecution still needs to build a case around the DNA.
Absolutely. They need to combine the DNA match with all the other evidence. The conditions of the body, the cause of death, strangulation, the sexual assault findings from the autopsy, the location where she was found, Bilodeau's proximity to the scene back in 1984, and of course, that alleged statement he made. The DNA anchors the identity. The context proves the crime.
Given the history here, the wrongful convictions, the proven misconduct, you've got to assume the defense will attack this new evidence relentlessly.
Oh, without a doubt. This case carries so much baggage. The defense knows the jury pool might be aware of the past failures. They will scrutinize everything.
Where do you expect them to focus first?
Chain of custody on that smoothie straw will be target number one. Even if collecting abandoned trash is legal, they'll question every step. Who picked it up? How was it bagged? Was it sealed immediately? Who transported it? Could it have been contaminated at the scene, in the police car, in the lab? They'll try to introduce any possibility, however remote, that the DNA found wasn't purely Bilodeau's from that straw.
What about the science itself, the forensic genetic genealogy? Can they challenge that?
They definitely will. FGG is relatively new in courtrooms compared to traditional DNA testing. They'll demand all the raw data, the lab protocols, the bioinformatics analysis from Othram and the FBI. They'll hire their own experts to question the algorithms used, the statistical probabilities, the potential for errors in building those massive family trees based on distant relatives found in public databases.
Trying to poke holes in the method that led police to Bilodeau in the first place.
Exactly. They'll argue it's not as precise or validated as standard STR testing. They want to plant doubt. Maybe the genealogy pointed to the wrong branch of the family tree.
Is the secondary transfer argument plausible here, suggesting his DNA got there innocently?
It's almost always raised as a possibility by defense teams. But with seminal fluid found internally on a victim of sexual assault, arguing innocent secondary transfer is, well, it's an extremely steep uphill climb. How would that specific biological material get there indirectly in that quantity and location? It's highly improbable, bordering on impossible, especially after 41 years. But they might still float the idea just to muddy the waters.
It sounds like the defense has avenues, but the DNA itself is a huge hurdle for them.
It is. If the chain of custody holds and the match is confirmed, it's a powerful piece of direct evidence linking him to the crime scene in a very specific way.
Which leads us to the human side and the wider implications. Segment 4, the scrutiny of justice.
And the human cost is just immense here. Theresa's family, 41 years of uncertainty, of grief, compounded by the injustice done to the wrongly convicted men.
Her father, Thomas Fusco, was at the arraignment.
He was. And he spoke about the heartbreak of having to relive it all, over and over again. The initial trial, the appeals, the exonerations, the case going cold. But he also expressed hope that this, finally, might be the finalization. He even brought a picture of Theresa to court.
It's heartbreaking that her mother passed away in 2019, before this arrest.
It really is. Mr. Fusco mentioned his faith in the system now, trusting the science that wasn't available back then. It's a powerful statement after everything they've been through.
And we should remember, this wasn't happening in a vacuum back in '84. There were other cases in that area around the same time, right?
That's an important piece of context. Just months before Theresa disappeared, another teenager, 15-year-old Kelly Morrissey, vanished from the same area. She's never been found.
And another young woman,
Jacqueline Martorella, 19. Her body was found the following year, 1985, at a nearby country club.
And the men who were wrongly convicted for Theresa's murder, they had links to these other girls.
Yes, there were connections. One of the men had apparently dated Kelly Morrissey. This undoubtedly increased the pressure on police back then. You have multiple missing or murdered young women in a short period in the same community. The public demand for answers, for arrests, must have been immense.
Which might have contributed to the rush to judgment, the questionable tactics.
It's certainly a factor psychologists and legal experts point to in cases of wrongful conviction. Intense pressure can lead to tunnel vision and cutting corners, sometimes with devastating results, as we saw here.
So this history, the misconduct, the wrongful convictions, the other potentially related cases, it all puts this new prosecution under a microscope, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The district attorney's office knows this. They know every move they make will be scrutinized by the media, the defense, the judiciary, and the public, precisely because of what happened before.
How are they handling that?
They seem to be very deliberate, emphasizing the reliance on objective science, bringing in external experts like Othram, consulting with retired detectives who knew the original case but weren't part of the alleged misconduct. They're trying to project an image of extreme care and diligence to show this isn't the 1980s investigation repeating itself. They have to get this right.
It really feels like a full circle moment, from relying on things like coerced confessions and disputed hairs
Evidence that could be manipulated or misinterpreted.
to identifying a suspect decades later based on incredibly precise genomic sequencing from a piece of trash.
It's the ultimate validation in many ways of how far forensic science has come. It required both leaps, the STR testing in the 2000s to free the innocent, and then this much more powerful FGGS and genealogy in the 2020s to finally find the person allegedly responsible.
And none of it happens if that original 1984 sample wasn't preserved.
That's the silent hero of the story, perhaps. That tiny bit of biological material kept properly for over 40 years, waiting for the technology to catch up to it.
So wrapping this up, we've seen this huge shift. From the flawed subjective methods of the 80s that led to injustice, to the almost unbelievable precision of modern DNA and genetic genealogy. And it all hinged on preserving that tiny sample from 1984.
Which really brings us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to consider. We know the 1984 investigation failed partly due to misconduct, but also partly due to the limits of its time. If that same investigation happened today, under the intense scrutiny we expect now, with the demand for scientific proof, would the evidence needed look totally different?
And maybe more importantly,
Yeah, how does the success of this 40-year-old cold case, solved because evidence was meticulously preserved, change how we think about evidence preservation now, for every case happening today? Because the science will keep evolving, we need to make sure the evidence is there for it to analyze, potentially decades down the line.
a crucial point. The future might hold answers we can't even imagine yet, but only if we safeguard the questions contained in the evidence today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.